Right, and to discuss more about the impact of the Fed's rate hike on Indonesia and the global economy, we are joined by Joshua Pardede, Chief Economist of Bank Permata. Hi, Joshua. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So the
Thanks
Fed,
for having me, Krishna.
okay, good evening. So the Fed hiked its interest rates by 75 basis points for the fourth consecutive time, quite aggressively. U.S. markets reacted negatively. Now, can you tell us how will this fourth 75 basis points rate hike impact the U.S. economy? First, will it increase the risk of a U.S. recession?
Yes, of course. We've seen that the interest rate hikes in U.S. will likely lead to the higher cost of borrowing for the business players, and of course, this will lead to the lower consumer spending because uh, uh, because because of the higher interest rate will lead to the higher savings, yeah, for the people. And then we expect that the probability of U.S. recession next year to be higher than before, because currently, if you look at the market expectation, there is already, as per yesterday, the probability of U.S. recession in 2023 currently is around 60%. Yeah, and then we are looking at condition that higher inflation and then to be responded by the interest rate hikes. Yeah, again, for sure, this will lead to the hard landing in U.S. economy.
Right, and of course, the Fed have hinted that they will continue to hike rates until they meet the target of inflation of 2%. They're still far away from it. So also, I want to ask, the IMF and the World Bank have also sounded the alarm of a global recession. So does the Fed's aggressive rate hikes, including this one, does it raise the risk of a global recession, Joshua?
Yeah, again, the global recession, meaning that when the Fed already raised interest rates, this would be followed by other central banks. For example, like ECB, looking at the higher inflation in October, yeah, the ECB also already raised policy rates, and then this will be also followed by the BOE and other central banks in order to tame the inflationary pressure this year, because the higher inflation will not be good for the purchasing power, because the real wage will be lower due to the rising inflationary pressure. So I think because it will confirm for the IMF and World Bank projection that so many countries in Europe, including US, will experience an recession next year as soon as third quarter next year or fourth quarter next year. Yeah, the economy will be uh, uh, affected by the rising policy rates from the global central banks. So I think we need to still to anticipate, yeah, the inflationary and then the rising policy rates in the global central bank. Yeah, this will lead to the higher probability of recession in so many countries in Europe, including also in US.
If I'm not wrong, previously you were projecting the chances of a U.S. recession at 60%. What are your projections for the chances of a global recession next year?
Yeah, I think looking at the Europe condition, currently most countries in Europe are experiencing energy crisis currently. Yeah, so basically we are expecting that the rising inflation still persists until beginning of next year. So I believe that the ECB also will respond by raising interest rate further in order to tame again the inflationary pressure. I think the probability of recession in Europe seem to be higher compared to probability recession in US, knowing taking into account that the condition in the energy prices management, I think in Europe, I think is worse than condition in the US. So we are looking at the higher probability and the recession in Europe is higher compared to in US. But I think Indonesia and then also some emerging countries, I think, is still relatively isolated from the global recession, since Indonesia itself, the biggest contributor to the economy is the private consumptions, accounts more than 55 to 58%, while the net export contribution to Indonesian GDP is around less than 10%. So we are expecting that what we did in 2008 when a global financial crisis happened, and then most countries in the world went to the recession. Indonesia GDP at the time still was still resilient. So we are expecting the same story in next year, that although the domestic economy or GDP will be slowing down, but the question is whether Indonesia will go into the recession. I think the probability is relatively small, and then we are isolated from the global supply chain.
So, as you mentioned, Indonesia's economy will be more isolated and more resilient. But of course, going back to the Fed rate hikes, the aggressive Fed rate hikes we've seen so far has also resulted in a stronger US dollar, and also the rupiah has been weakening. So with this fourth aggressive rate hike, are we going to see an even stronger US dollar? And will we see the rupiah depreciate even further, Pak Joshua?
Yeah, based on the Fed's Jay Powell statement last night, that the terminal rate in US will be higher than earlier expectation. So this leads to the higher US Treasury yields yesterday until during Asian session today, and then by the time US Treasury yield continue to increase, this will be followed also by the stronger dollar against major currencies, including also Asian currencies. So I think the stronger dollar will be seen at least in the next couple months, until the Fed starts to signal the market that the Fed will likely pause the rate hikes until some time, and then looking at also the expectation of US recession, there is also a higher probability in the beginning of 2024 that the Fed will likely shift their monetary policy stance to be more accommodative. And yeah, of course, in order to tame domestic inflation pressure, and also in order to manage rupiah stability, Bank Indonesia also is expected to raise further interest rates to around 5.25% this year, and then to be followed also by another 50 basis point hikes next year, in the beginning of next year. So I think in order to manage the interest rate differentials between the Fed rate and also Bank Indonesia policy rates, in order again to manage rupiah stability, because sometimes the condition right now, the FX liquidity sort of limited, because of the condition that stronger dollar lead to the higher expectation or higher probability of holding lower right now. So basically, although the export performance currently in Indonesia is relatively positive and solid, but the domestic the devisa hasil export, I think, is still relatively limited to Indonesia. So that's why implying that the liquidity in dollar seem to be very limited currently.
Okay. I just have a very, very short question for you. You maybe have about 15 seconds to answer. The Indonesian rupiah, do you believe it could breach the level of 16,000 in the weeks to come? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, technically speaking, yes, it could be reached. It could be reaching 16,000 level, but it depends how Bank Indonesia's measures to stabilize rupiah in triple intervention, and also in order to manage dollar liquidity, in the short term, when BI can manage the dollar liquidity and and can manage also the condition, intervening to the market, I think we can limit the weakening rupiah until 16,000 level. But technically speaking, I think it could be happening sometime in the next couple of weeks.
So you still have hope with Bank Indonesia's intervention measures, but as you said, technically it could happen. Joshua Pardede, Chief Economist of Bank Permata, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you for having me.